Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Paige Show. I have Jen with me again today. If you guys didn't watch our last episode together on Ghost, it was a really fun spin and take on energy and ghost in our life and all of the things. So go back and listen to that. And today we're going to be talking about something a little bit more somber, but I also want to bring some light to that as well, as we usually do on the Paige Show. So we're going to work together today to talk about the topic of suicide. In the medium world, I personally like to say people who have chosen to exit. It just feels a little bit less scary. You know, people tend to run from that word. And so it's been on my heart as a person that's had personal experience with suicide, family, friends, and a struggle within my own experience, within near-death experience. I really have felt led to change the stigma on suicide. That's the best way I can explain it. And Jen and I really have been on the same page with this for a long time. So we have really wanted to do this. It's all coming together now, and we will not cover it all today. There's just too many layers, right? There's way too many layers to this topic, and we're going to make this a little mini series where we kind of cover what we have experienced from the other side as mediums working with suicide around people choosing to exit, but our personal lives as well, because it really had, it started there for both of us. And so suicide's one of those things that it's really hard to feel connected to or have a grasp of understanding about if it hasn't touched you personally somewhere in your life. And I will tell you now, from someone who has experienced that, and Jen's going to share her stories as well, once you have seen that side of humanity, that side of the other side of things, you really become a more compassionate person overall, or at least that's the hope. Because you have no choice but to see that some of the stigmas around suicide and why people choose to do that are really false. And it is just that, a stigma, a false belief system. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the beliefs that drive people after loss, the beliefs around how people struggle with healing, the journey of grief after a loss of someone who chooses to exit. And that's really the foundational place we're going to start in this series, because it's where it all starts. Until we can get past beliefs on anything, our mind's not open to the idea that there's something new. And so I encourage you guys, if you haven't watched or listened to my series, Diaries of a Medium, please do that. Jen, I want you to give your opinion on it. I know you've gone through it several times. Really encouraging you to do that. Yes, I am promoting my own work because it's not mine. It was an extreme period of time, a couple of months. I talked to Jen in the middle of doing that series about how extremely difficult that divine download was. If you haven't watched Divine Downloads, you need to watch that too, or you have no idea what I'm talking about. So both of those series can be found on all the platforms that podcasts are held if you look up The Paige Show, or you can go to thepageshow.com and it's under my series tab there. So I really need you guys to hear my words on that. I do very little promotion with myself. I let Spirit do that. Everyone who works with me knows that. But with this, it's just a whole different beast, and it's something very dear to my heart that I feel like could be life-changing for a lot of people out there who are listening, either struggling with thoughts of suicide or have had it touch you personally. When we get back to the stigmas, let's get back on track here with the beliefs and where we'll go today. We really are talking about things that hold people back from being able to voice if they're struggling with it, feeling like they are not safe to admit that there will be judgment around it, but also a lot of what happens after someone has chosen to cross, what happens to the people who are left behind. And so we're going to kind of touch all of that today. So I'm going to give the floor over to Jen and let her kick us off because I know her little wheels are spinning there. So go ahead, Jen.
They are. Thanks, Paige. It's so nice to be back here. I will tell everybody this just as a disclaimer before we start that definitely to listen to Paige's podcasts and really kind of get the gist of what this series is really and truly all about. Because as Paige mentioned, there's a lot of stigmas behind suicide and things that most folks don't think about when we go into talking about this particular difficult subject. One of the biggest ones I think that I've come across just in my own healing and in my own path really is why? Why did this happen? Or, gosh, that's a really selfish thing to do. That's one of the biggest ones. And I really am here to set that record straight from a very personal place because there are a lot of whys. And not every why that we see are things that we can always control or things that we can fix or, gosh, the shoulda, woulda, couldas of suicide. You will, forever and for a very long time after my loss, I really beat myself up over that. But then there comes a spot and a place in life where you have to learn to let go of that and forgive. And forgiveness is the other thing that we'll get to, I think, later on down the road in another series. But for today, from just a personal place, in order to kind of get started, I think the easiest way to do this is to just talk about what happened. So I was in a very long-term relationship with someone that I loved very, very deeply. I became pregnant. We were not married. And it was a really rough time. He had a very difficult upbringing and filled with a lot of abuse and a lot of just very tough things that he had to go through. But he rose above those ashes. So that's another series that you should listen to on Paige is rising above and really kind of digging yourself out of the dirt and being what you are. Some people can do that really well. Some people really can't. And some people just hold on to it forever. Unfortunately, he did. Was a very successful software engineer for a very large company here in Colorado and had a very severe drinking problem. That drinking problem led off to discover injuries and pain that he had sustained while serving in the military. Life just was not good to him, unfortunately. And those demons that get talked about are very real. And there's darkness around certain people that they just can't escape from. So I was his light because I am a light being and I'm a bubbly person. So that was always something that was said was, gosh, you're such a happy, bubbly person. And I'd like to think that I brought out good qualities in that person. Unfortunately, our relationship failed shortly before the birth of our daughter. He was in a very dark place, was abusing things that he shouldn't have been abusing. And ended up overdosing. And this was roughly a few days after I gave birth to our daughter. So unfortunately, our daughter never got to meet him. But I carried that guilt and that shame and that hurt and the pain with me. And then I've got this little baby that I have as a gift. So for me, my daughter's birth was my saving grace because I had something to focus my love and my energy on while grieving. So it was a very different, twisted time in my life, but over a lot of counseling and a lot of therapy, and really, honestly, none of it really worked for me. What did work was talking to Paige. And I will tell you that people don't always understand what that's like to know that someone is in such a dark place, to see the darkness around them, but to be able to get real talk about there's nothing to feel guilty about. It's okay to be pissed off at him for what he did because you've raised this child by yourself and there was nothing there. But it's also okay to forgive him. And it took me a very, very, very long time to forgive that. But through my work and through my friendship and my ability to work with Paige over these years on an emotional healing platform, because this is so much deeper than just a heart level. It goes so much deeper than that. I have been able to let him go and to forgive and to wish him nothing but love and light, because I see now through my work that he is happy. So one of the questions I get asked a lot by my daughter, who is now 22, and she's very happy and very successful, and she's also very gifted, is, does he talk to you? Well, no, he shows me symbols. He talks to Paige. And that's a very different situation altogether, but there's a lot of reasons why. And again, that's something to go a little deeper into at another time. But one of the things, though, that is so important is, it wasn't a selfish thing. I don't see it as being selfish. I see it as having a mental illness, which is also a very, very, very big topic, in today's society. So it isn't a selfish thing. This is my choice, because we all have choices, and learning that people have choices and that are free-willed humans and spiritual bodies to make choices. That is their time. That is their life path. And their life path is finished on this particular plane, on this particular dimension, has happened to be finished. There was just a lot of pain. And for him, his way was to exit and start on his new path and his new journey, because he broke a karmic cycle for his life, of his own doing. So hopefully the lessons in his next life will carry forward to hopefully better him as a human being in his next journey. And I always pray that, and I hope that, and I wish that for that person. So
right. Well, I think you're absolutely right. Sharing your story is a good way to kick that off. We'll both be sharing pieces of our story as it pertains to the topic, but I think we'll use yours today, because on the idea of beliefs, and when you found me and we started working through this and the medium side of things, there were some beliefs that we had to break through for you because of your religious background. So we want to talk first a little bit about the religious piece. We all come from some background. It doesn't have to be religious, but we all bring our own beliefs into our story from what we've experienced. And with suicide in particular, I have, in my own experience and doing medium work as well, messages from the other side and just what people give as feedback. Suicide across the board, a lot of people have a feeling about that there is darkness around that. If they seek mediumship after, it's usually because the first question is, I want to make sure they're okay and they're not in that place of, burning fire and brimstone. And so I will not go into all of those beliefs today. That's in Diaries of a Medium. But I do need to bring that forward, that you have to come to a place that the staging and the stages of grief, also in Diaries of a Medium, that came in a whole unique way. That awareness that came to me through that download will show you that we all have a little bit of that around suicide, no matter your background. And you have to know, are they okay? And you have to know, then why? That's kind of like the questions and the order of, all along with guilt and things like that. So we're going to cover all of that in this series of suicide. But on the belief topic, the best I can tell you on the beliefs is it has to be something that feels like your truth. And you can only find that through experiencing something, seeking something out. So if you are in that stage right now, you've lost someone, you're struggling with it yourself, whatever it is that's keeping you on the ledge of choosing not to, or you've already jumped, through that, whatever happens, you have to work through beliefs, no matter where you come from, because we can't get past anything else until you do that. And so I'm not here to preach beliefs. That's not what the Paige show is about. But from experience, I would tell everyone to really dig deep and start to look at your story and say, Do these beliefs still serve me? I encourage people to do that on every area, but especially around loss, particularly suicide. Because if you stay stuck in old beliefs and patterns that we know are not coming forward in this new age of change, the old is not serving us. If you stay in those patterns, you can't even start the process of the grief journey. And it is a journey.
It's a very long journey.
You don't know where the end is. I really teach that there is no end. That's why I call it that. It's a journey. You're on it together with spirit and your soul group and your own shadow self. All of those things are involved in the grief process. So on the topic of beliefs around suicide, that's it. You got to get past like your religious pieces first. And then you have to get past the beliefs of where you hold a role in it, right? Like that's the part of the guilt and the shame. Did I not do enough? And when you're telling your story, I know you don't mind me pointing this out. Through the years of working with you, when we went through those stages of the grief journey, that was a hard one for you to overcome because of what you just shared. Being bubbly, being his cheerleader for life. No matter what you did in your eyes for the longest, it felt like you still failed. And that is very, that's very, very common with suicide over any other process of crossing or of death. And I'm going to do that in quotations because we know there's no real death. But with that, suicide's a hard one. The people left behind tend to have to do more work around that loss than any other loss. Would you agree with that?
I absolutely do. And even in the clientele that I have now that have and are dealing with suicide and loss, those are my favorite clients to try to kind of walk through that grief, my own personal grief path. And I learned that grief path very differently, and I had to come to it. And you just made a great point, is that not every situation, not every counseling, not every communication or connection that we make with people who we go off to try to seek help from is going to be the right connection for you. You have to follow your truth, regardless of what religion you are. And we're the woo girls, of the spirit world. It's not really like that. We are healers. We are light workers. We can hear and see and talk to the other side. That can be a blessing and a curse for a lot of us. But at the same time, you have to live your truth. If you don't live your truth and you can't come to terms with wrapping your mind around learning death or crossing over or passing on a different plane, then grief will always be a hard path for you to walk. And that's an important thing to know. There is no time frame is the other one. There is no time frame for this. I'm coming up on the 22nd anniversary in about a week and a half. And I don't remember him that day. I remember the gift that he left behind, because truly she has been a gift. I remember him with love. I don't remember sadness at this point, but it's taken me a hell of a long time to get to this point. And I work through it every day of my life. There are good days and there are bad days, and there's always going to be that. This work isn't going to heal 100% of all the damage that maybe mentally has been done, but it can help you on a soul level. And that's the most important message I think that we're trying to convey, is that you believe what you want, but we will always honor your beliefs and respect them. Definitely.
Right. And just to know that in evaluating our beliefs, it's just like anything else that we're trying to evolve in. Hopefully, we're all trying to continue to grow. If you're not growing, you're dead, right? I can't say that enough. And so if we include that in it, it's just another one of those things that we evaluate. Maybe your beliefs are fine. If that's serving you and it's not hindering your process of grief and your journey along the way, that's great. It doesn't need to be evaluated. But for the most part, if we're talking about suicide, I would encourage you, if you feel stuck or stagnant around the loss of that, that you need to evaluate beliefs first. That's what we're saying today.
Right.
Because in that probably lies your answer to how you start that journey of grief, how you don't stay in the anger and the rage and the pain. And the big thing is to really understand that when we talk about being healers and working with the other side, this is not even a piece of the series that would explain how all of that works. Again, let's Diaries of a Medium and all the things that will be coming up next. But you do have to understand that there are other things out there. There are other modalities. When we talk about those modalities, we're again just saying we're the vessel. It's really no different than how people pray or commune to God if you have other beliefs. It's about the connection. It's about what your connection looks like and being aware that there's something more outside of yourself. Okay, that's what everything is really about, all of this. And so this is no different. So start within, start to evaluate that first if you're feeling stuck, because that's where your answers will lie to begin you down the path that you need for your story. It all begins there. So when we talk about more stigmas around suicide and the beliefs behind it, there are also a lot of beliefs and stigmas on that only people with mental illness or struggling emotionally will choose to exit. And we are seeing there are crazy statistics right now. Like the easiest thing to throw out is, suicide, I think now as of last year was in the top 10 causes of death. And causes of death, like an illness is how they have kind of categorized it, because they categorize it with mental health issues.
Right.
Okay. And
they do.
And that is fine, because we do know that there's a lot of chemical imbalances and hormonal things that are happening. We know there's some science behind why some people do that. And we find out later, afterwards, either through mediumship or spirituality or straight.
Or sometimes or sometimes we never find out.
You may not. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. But, we know that there is something to the mental health piece. And so I'm not discrediting that. But there is on what we talk about on the page. So if we're talking about the spiritual side of it and bringing that in as well, there's a huge spiritual piece. And the first place we would start with that in the next part of the series is on contracts. Why people choose to exit. Why that is some people's way of ending their contract, or like Jen said, his story kind of ended on this plane. He's off to other things for now. That's kind of a really quick summary. And so we'll get into all of that, but I want to bring that in on the beliefs too, because if we get past things holding us back from thinking that's possible, then we can see that that's possible. That also helps with an understanding of the people left behind, understanding a little bit more in the waiting period of that grief journey. But it also highlights that there's other reasons why people choose to exit other than just mental health issues. There's a lot going on behind the scenes when contracts are explained as to why we have different roles in our soul group and why certain people will choose to go on their own free will. There's a lot of different things. People who are struggling with long-term terminal illnesses, there's nothing wrong with them mentally. They don't want to feel the pain anymore. There's so many examples we can't even possibly share, but I bring it up because there's too many stigmas that are putting us in a box and not allowing people to feel free to talk about this topic. And if we don't talk about something, it doesn't make it go away. It just makes us ignorant on how to deal with it. And so I'm very passionate, and I want everyone to hear that we are going to take this series very serious, bring some light where we can, but we want to get out there the message that we have to start talking about these hard topics. We have to be able to say, I tried to do this, I'm glad I survived, and I want to tell people what it felt like from that point of view. Or my son or my daughter took their life, and this is what I felt like. We need to
Right.
feel safe to do this now, like how you openly shared your story for everyone out here to hear. I know
Right.
people are not always going to be the same with that, but when we're talking
That's
about the
okay.
stigma on suicide, this is such an important topic that we have to start airing out our stories on it for people to know that this is a real thing. They're not alone. Other people are struggling with it. So we can
Yeah,
all start to come to a solution, if that's the word for it, on how to
absolutely.
help each other.
I think that that's excellent. I have to applaud you on that. That is so accurate, because I will tell you, and again, this is along the same vein of the belief system. I was raised very strict Catholic, okay? And in the Catholic community, when somebody dies in this particular manner, it's not talked about. This is a shh, we don't talk about that.
Right.
Or they committed suicide. Or one of my family members was even making up stories about what happened to this person. And I am not that going to ever hide what happened in my life, but I'm not looking for sympathy either. I have grown to not look for sympathy. I don't want it. I've had a great life. I have a great daughter. I have moved on with my life, and I'm very happy now. But at the same time, that happens more often than not, where this is such a taboo subject. It is such a taboo subject, and it's really silly because it's kept in its own little box.
Right.
Suicide is very much kept in its own little box. And the blame can go for mental illness. It's not, because I've had my own personal experience with not wanting to be here anymore and contemplated it, as I'm sure that we will learn down the road. Others have too.
Yeah.
And it had nothing to do with mental illness. It had to do with pain. It had to do with a lot of different things. So that just because you're in pain, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a mental illness necessarily. So there are, as Paige said, so many other reasons that people choose to take their own lives. Even in my little hometown, we had a terrible, terrible loss of an officer that was very dear and close to the Ayurveda community and to myself personally. And people are grieving in such a way that there's been a lot of heart talks with kids that this person touched. And so again, the point is that it isn't just around mental illness. It isn't just around that. So breaking that belief system is really important when we talk about that, and opening up the floor to talk about suicide and opening the box and let's tell our stories,
Right.
because that's how we heal.
Yeah, and you brought up another good point. When we talk about this is for people left behind, this is a particular way of exit that it's harder for the people left behind. We need to include the children in that, because
Absolutely.
kids now, there's such a high rate of suicide among young children. I think the last statistic was age 12. It was kind of rampant. If you think about that, I have a 12-year-old. That's like middle school ages. And we think, what could possibly be so bad as a child in middle school that these kids are taking their lives? And we have so many things to address with that as and part of the series too, between the video games and the damage mentally that they are showing statistics, psychology issues, the bullying, because you can't escape it now. It's everywhere. If you have a phone in your hand, you're exposed to it. If your parents allow you to be part of all the social media, you're exposed to it. So there's so many things that now as parents or guardians, we cannot keep from children anymore. We can't shelter them because we are not equipping them if we do. And suicide's a huge one. Whoever would have thought that you needed to talk about that? But if it happens in your family and your kids ask, you better know what you're going to say. You better have worked through your belief systems to give them something to deal with, so that you're not having to deal with them down the road, potentially choosing it because they don't understand, because they think it's like a video game and you can come back with 9 lives, or they or have been shamed into not talking about it.
Right.
And so they want to explore it and they dabble with it like they would, drugs or anything else, but it's not something you come back from when you dabble in it. And so we have to get past beliefs, not only for ourselves around loss, but be there for our children and the others around us that are not equipped to understand it. The elderly, if you talk with your grandparents or, just people a few generations like me, a few generations older than me, I have a few mentors like that. If they weren't in this world, I could tell you already from their belief systems, they would not have the same understanding around suicide as I have grown to get, right?
To know. Right.
And it's because of those generational gaps. And so we have to understand that this is something that touches everyone. And we need to be able to talk about it so that people feel supported and they don't have to just call a hotline. They have a soul group, their people in their lives, family, friends, loved ones that they can lean on. And so we have to be that for people. They're not going to always find you. And something beautiful is this podcast that's going to reach so many people could be done in your daily life if you start to explore the belief systems within you and get yourself equipped to be other people's support for this, because you've got the mental health piece. They definitely need support. And if you have ever been in a place where you've thought about like, this is too hard, this contract's too hard, I need to tap out, I need a break. That's what goes through a lot of people's mind who do not have mental health issues, like what Jen shared. And that's part of my near-death experience that you guys probably have heard about on the show already. So you don't have to be sick per se, like people want to make you. That's what I want to get out there today. And we have to understand there's too many levels of suicide to really comprehend it. Even when we go through it, there's so many intangibles and unknowings of what's happening when somebody crosses, that all you have is your own story, your own set of beliefs to evaluate, your own tools to gain to help you through the journey of grief. And if you get all of those things, then you will be equipped to face something like someone choosing to exit.
Right. And of course, definitely there are places to go. If you are feeling like this is the end of your life, then we'd always encourage reaching out. There is Lifeline. There are so many support systems. My profession is as a nurse, and I have counseled folks on those things and pointed them in the direction of the National Suicide Prevention Hotline or Lifeline. We definitely encourage that, but where do you go as a survivor of those things? I don't personally call myself a victim because I'm not a victim. However, I have survived someone's death that I loved. And Paige brought up a great point about children. Where do these kids go when the parent can't, or the guardian or whomever they're with? Where do these children go? Where do these kids go for help to talk them and walk them through it? I can tell you that my oldest, not knowing her father, has dealt with her own type of grief in not having one. So there's grief of the unknown too, which we can get to in another time. But at the age that she's at right now, knowing him would have been helpful. She knows him in a picture that she has with her all the time, every day. But also, I think you also touched on a great point. You have to be honest, and you have to know what you're going to say to your children about the loss of someone close to them. And there was a way to do it when she asked me at 6 years old where Daddy was. And then there's a way to do it at 22 that brings it down to reality. And I think that that's very important, that, you're aiding and staging accurately, and in a way that they can understand in their little minds. And because their minds are not even as little as we think that they are. I think that kids get taken for granted a lot as to what they know and what they feel and what they're sensing. So it's important to really have that open forum and open dialogue and honest. I never lied to my daughter about what happened. I made it age appropriate for her to understand it in the way that she did. And because of that, we have a beautiful relationship and can openly talk about him. And it's been a beautiful journey. It truly has.
Right.
So.
And in doing that, when we share truths of things, and I love how you say age appropriate, instead of shutting it down, that, I wouldn't have talked about that, or my parents wouldn't have talked to me about that at that
No,
age. We are not in the generation we can do that anymore.
no,
We
no.
are birthing way more advanced little people, and they have to, because they've got to carry this load, beyond us.
Right.
We got a lot of work to do, people. And so these little people
Yes, we
are
do.
coming in droves because they are here to help. They are volunteers, and they understand and see more than anything, like you said. But you have to be able to do it age appropriate. I love that she pointed that out, but not lie, because they need to have a
Right.
story of this person, a story that they don't just create in their head, but something that could be the truth for the time that carries them through their own process of grief and journey until they're old enough to really understand it. But again, understand it is in quotations, because this is also intangible. People are listening now, and I'm sure they're saying, just because you are a medium and you work with things from the other side doesn't mean that that's true. You could view mediumship as another set of beliefs. It absolutely is. And it's not
Right.
something I would ever push on anyone to believe. You have to experience it to believe
Right.
it. But they're absolutely right. It's another form of a belief system. And if we're being honest, all we can say is true is what is our truth.
Right.
And you have to know your truth. Know thyself. That's the key to it all. And so you have to be able to equip these other people, these little people, to know thyself by giving them the information that can serve them, where they still have a story of this person that they lost, and the person doesn't become invisible. And that is huge on this journey of grief after suicide as well, that we're going to get into later, about how you have to remember them. You've mentioned that a lot, like how your memory of him has evolved through understanding and getting through the beliefs, the boundaries, and the stigmas that would keep you from wanting to tap into this person. The stories of, like, you need to not talk about it. It's hush hush. As you get through that, you start to realize that you form a story again of their true self, of their true soul essence, versus what you experience with them. And going through those barriers in your journey of grief will also help you to even come up with some of the whys of why this person chose to exit. You start to see where they were coming from, almost from being in their shoes. Now, where the medium, Diaries of a Medium, comes from is really doing medium work, as being on that other side of things. You get a lot of insight from spirit about why people choose to exit as well. And we'll get into all of that later of the series. But on the beliefs, that's one of it. Even the people who choose to exit have worked through some of their beliefs around it. Common sense would be, these people are way more evolved, for the most part, than we give them credit for when we shame them into saying that was a selfish thing to do. All of the things that you have to process through, granted, and we'll talk about that.
Course.
You go through all of that, and there is some selfishness to it. I will give that to them. I felt that myself walking through it. But as you process through all of that, you come to the different place of awareness. That's always the key, a place of awareness, where you start to see from their perspective. You see from the other side why this person processed through. And they often are way more evolved than we give them credit for, because if we just break it down, really dumb it down, if they believed in some fiery hell that we get preached at about all the time, and I'm going to break so many people, stop watching now, because I don't hold back on this show. Poor Jen, she's like, oh my God, what did I sign up for?
Stop it.
But seriously, I'm not holding back on this one. It's the huge thing with beliefs. Who in their right mind would take their own life? The first key is right mind. So we have that mental piece there. We have the pain and suffering piece.
Yes.
We have that, hey, this contract's too hard. I want to
Can't
tap
do
out
it.
piece, all of the layers of why people choose to exit. You have all of that, and you would still not convince me that you would choose to exit if you believed in some fiery hell that you were going to. Nobody would sign up for that. That's way worse than what you would be dealing with here for the most
And why would
part.
we cause suffering to
I
ourselves?
mean, right? This is a very dumbed down example, but when we're getting in the nitty gritty of beliefs, you have to start questioning your beliefs, people. Question them. The worst that will happen is you come back to the same solution in your head. You come right back that it's your truth. But the best that can happen is you will discover that is not your truth. It is something that has been told to you or preached to you or beat in your head of beliefs. So we have to walk that journey. What better topic to kick that off on than this, because it's such a hot topic around beliefs. But think about that from the other person's perspective. When you're going through this, when you allow yourself down that journey, opening it up to your beliefs, it's common sense for me that I wouldn't choose that suffering, which then leads into believing that these people have processed through it for a while, a lot of times, before they actually choose to do that. Maybe they believe they are going to some fiery place, but they've made peace with that too, if that's what they chose to hold on to. So what I'm talking about is that not only are there beliefs around the journey of healing after suicide, but the belief breaking is happening under the surface for the individuals who are choosing to exit way before they choose. Even if it's sudden and everyone says, I thought that person was happy, and if you could see the message from the other side, if you could be in that person's shoes again, I guarantee you there would be a piece of time where they processed through that before they chose, sudden or not.
I knew, definitely for a fact that for my person, he threatened it a lot, usually under duress, usually under an alcoholic stupor, but it's a very different situation. It's a very different path. And I know that now, but you don't always listen to the signs when you're in life.
Right, which is another good point that we'll bring up when we get into the shame and how the people behind, kind of the different elements that they deal with for the people left behind on their journey of grief. So I hope you guys have enjoyed what we've talked about today. We definitely could spend hours on this, and beliefs are going to come up through the rest of the series of this talk of choosing to exit. Don't even know what I'm going to title it yet. It's just kind of a download on a whim, and that's how we roll on the Paige show. So if this brings up questions for you guys, we would love to see those until we're able to do more live interaction, comment, follow, share, all of the things. I'm always looking at the comments, so please reach out for questions there. Our contact info will always be at the end of videos, and you can reach out for that. But just start first with beliefs. That's really all we're saying today. We're not telling you what to believe, but we are telling you there are beliefs at stake around the topic of suicide, the stigmas around suicide. And if we can all just agree to start in one place, the easiest place would be around beliefs. Start evaluating that and allow yourself and the people around you to start your journey of grief, of understanding this type of loss with judgment aside. Because if we don't have a stigma on something, if we haven't put it in a box, there's no way we can judge it. I want everyone to hear that. And this is one that we need to take out of the box, stop judging it, understand it more, seek to understand it more, and if anything else, be open that there are so many layers, so many intangibles that we may never know the real truth, but we can discover our truth.
Absolutely. And talk about it. It's okay to talk about it.
Yeah. All right. Well, are we good, Jen? Anything else you want to say?
We're good.
Okay.
We are great.
So, like always, until we do this again, take care of yourself.